Okay, we are trying something different today. I'm going to record with a different program. We'll see what happens. And we are on chapter 3 of the Doctrine of Cycles. So, out of the ocean of time and forth from the ocean of life goes the manifestation of the race of men unto life and light. Written it was of old in the most ancient of books, but the understanding of it is concealed from the eye and the brain. This is from the poem, the proem to the Popol Vuh, Ancient America. I'm not sure about that. I haven't read that. According to the ancient teachings regarding the evolution of humanity, there are 7 root races, of which we are in the 5th. Our root race, as such, began about 1 million years ago, and we are now about midway along the course of its wheeling. Each root race is divided into 7 sub-races, which again are divided into family races of some 30,000 years duration. Each race and sub-race passes through its own rounds of birth, active maturity, and decline. The same periods mark the course of the civilization of each sub-race, as well as the continued divisions of mankind into different nations, states, communities, and family groups. Keeping pace with these different cycles of human experience, there's an increasing number of the manifesting forms and forces in the realms of nature as the spiritual man descends into the matter of material life on earth. This descent is called the shadowy arc of an evolutionary cycle. And honestly, that's why I put this picture down here. I found this searching for the evolutionary arc that I thought I remembered being. It's either in an Annie Besant book or in the Secret Doctrine. And I found this wonderful little painting as I was looking for it. And this really says it all. And if we were to see where we're at on this, it would be somewhere down here about the 5 o'clock, in the 5 o'clock area, 5:30 area, right? As we descend into matter, and then we get down to the most dense portion of the cycle, and then we begin our evolutionary arc back up into full spirit. And so let's keep going. At the midpoint or lowest level of this circuit, the earth matter begins to refine, and the human egos start with their progressive ascent of the upward arc toward a lofty state of spirituality. This is called a planetary manvantara, which includes the entire 49 rounds and of the 7 races of that humanity, and it marks the life of the earth itself. The ancient Hindus call this planetary cycle a day of Brahma, a period of manifesting life, 4,320,000,000 years. This bare outline of a recurring cosmic time period shows the same rhythmic movement in the great wheel that runs throughout the whole Earth series of events. Now, this is what they call a day of Brahma, a planetary cycle. They call this planetary cycle a day of Brahma. I would like to look at the Secret Doctrine again, as I believe it's into the trillions of years. 316 trillion years is the full Maha Manvantar or something. I have to look and see. I'm not sure about all this, but this is pretty intense. So this outline of a recurring cosmic time period shows the same rhythmic movement in the great wheel that runs throughout the whole series of events, even down to Shakespeare's 7 Ages of Man. This universal law of progress, working through alternating periods of activity and rest, points out a unity of purpose in all evolution. H.P. Blavatsky says the relation of humanity to Earth of the relation of humanity to Earth, it is a case of descent into matter, the adjustment in both the mystic and physical senses of the two, and their interblending for the great coming struggle of life that awaits both the entities. Entity may be thought a strange term to use in the case of a globe, but the ancient philosophers who saw on the earth a huge animal were wiser in their generation than our modern geologists in theirs. And Pliny, who called the earth our kind nurse and mother, the only element which is not inimical to man, spoke more truly than Watts, who fancied that he saw her the footstool of God, for earth is only the footstool of man in his ascension to higher regions. Our earth has to live through 7 rounds. During the first 3, it forms and consolidates. During the 4th, it settles and hardens. During the last 3, it gradually returns to its first ethereal form. It is spiritualized, so to say. Its humanity develops fully only in the 4th, our present round. Up to this 4th life cycle, it is referred to as humanity, only for lack of more appropriate term, like the grub which becomes chrysalis and butterfly. Man, or rather that which becomes man, passes through all the forms and kingdoms during the first round and through all the human shapes during the 2 following rounds, arriving on our earth at the commencement of the 4th round in the present series of life cycles and races. Man is the first form that appears thereon, being preceded only by the mineral and vegetable kingdoms, even the latter having to develop and continue its further evolution through man. Though the absolute from which the universe comes forth must ever remain the unknown for the finite mind, yet we can know somewhat of the periodical beginnings of manifestation in the case of mankind and the earth. That naturally is what concerns and interests us the most. The earth, then, is the re-embodiment of the life atoms, the forces, and the conscious entities which animated the planetary chain of the now dead moon. The earth, then, is the re-embodiment of the life atoms, the forces, and the conscious entities which animated the planetary chain of the now dead moon. The life waves of every kind, from minerals to man, left the moon chain of globes when the time came for its long interplanetary rest in space. This planet's sleeping period was not unlike our regular nightly habit of putting out the light and retiring into restful darkness. When the cosmic clock struck at the dawn of another period of manifestation, the atoms and forces of mind and matter and spirit of the sleeping universe all felt the urge to come together again for a new day of planetary life. As always, nature and mankind work together for the grand new cycle. Just as the earth to be was, at first, without form and void, so the earliest forms of humans to be were vague and ethereal. Then, when the inner self, cycling down through ever denser grades of substance, became clothed in a physical body, it was the earth that provided its coats of skin. These physical coats are what we wear today, with the invisible astral model body within, cell for cell. The material atoms that circulate through the body take on something of its conscious quality, which they retain as they go forth with the outgoing cell. A pure and noble life thus squares the account with nature for the stream of atoms that unite to form the body. The plan in the universal mind is to teach everything to work together. The wise who have learned this say, help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance. And that's from the Voice of the Silence. In keeping with the general plan, the earth is a sevenfold entity. Therefore, with its 7 different gradations of substance and of character, the visible earth has 6 other globes which roll with it in space. These make up what is called the earth chain of globes. These correspond to the different states of human consciousness, which is destined to function in our evolving 7-fold nature. Only our gross body is visible to us because we are functioning on the solid 4th globe of the earth, which our body represents. The globes interpenetrating each other, being in coordination, but not in consubstantiality with our earth. The globes interpenetrating each other, being addition, but not in consubstantiality. Well, isn't this very deep? Six other globes which roll with it in space. These make up what is called the earth chain of globes. These correspond to the different states of human consciousness, which is destined to function in our evolving 7-fold nature. That is something to pause for a minute and certainly contemplate. At least in my case, maybe not yours. The subject is best regarded in its metaphysical and spiritual aspect, which corresponds to the inner realm of our being. Does not the invisible world of thought and feeling interpenetrate the rounds of physical life? Also, in dreamland, do we not see and think and feel and act in a realm where time and space and gravity are all keyed to astral vibrations independent of known laws of physics? Again, in deep dreamless sleep and in the ecstatic visions of a saintly person, it is a spiritual world that is entered. Mankind is destined eventually to cycle consciously through all these globes, adapted to different states of its own composite nature. Then, at the end of the great planetary cycle, the perfected human being's horizon will consciously include all the previous rounds of experience. And my thought is, are these rounds and globes, or the chain, and the globes in the chain, are they synonymous? Except, and what I know that you can be, we can be moving in advance of this. This is just so very interesting. The threefold evolutionary urge, which manifests in mankind as physical, mental, and spiritual unfolding, comes from that divine spiritual monadic influence, or ray, which is at the heart of everything and creature. The stream or mass of human egos evolving on our planetary chain is limited, though the actual quantity is incalculable for us. The stream or mass of human egos evolving on our planetary chain is limited, though the actual quantity is incalculable for us. These egos came from the moon chain as a life wave in successive streams. The first river of lives began on the first globe, and there went through 7 long rounds of evolution in bodies suited to that globe's state of matter. As this stream passed on to globe B, or the second one, another river of less progressed egos began their course around A. In orderly sequence, all made the circuit of globes, which are usually called, for convenience, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Everything fits into its own time and place and conditions in the cosmic drama which each humanity enacts it in its turn. Further details are given in the Secret Doctrine and other standard theosophical literature. W.Q. Judge gives a thumbnail sketch in saying, this journey went on for 4 cycling rounds, for 4 cyclings round the whole, and then the whole stream or army of egos from the old moon chain had arrived, and being complete, no more entered after the middle of the 4th round. The same circling process of these differently arrived classes goes on for 7 complete rounds of the whole 7 planetary centers of consciousness, and when the 7 are ended, as much perfection as is possible in the immense period occupied will have been attained, and then this chain or mass of globes will die in its turn to give birth to still another series. Each one of the globes is used by evolutionary law for the development of 7 races and of senses, faculties, and powers appropriate to that state of matter, the experience of the whole 7 globes being needed to make a perfect development. Hence we have this rounds and races. The round is a circling of the 7 centers of planetary consciousness. The race and the racial development on one of those 7, there are 7 races for each globe, but the total of 49 races only makes up 7 great races. The special septenate of races on each globe or planetary center, composing in reality 1 race of 7 constituents or special peculiarities of function and power. And that's from the Ocean of Theosophy. It is useless to attempt any account of the earlier conditions of mankind and the globe. The life and the matter of that time were wholly unlike anything we know of now. H.P. Blavatsky states that only when we come to consider our human race on our present 4th globe D, in our 4th round, do the conditions become fairly comprehensible to us. And I think they're, obviously, they're just now becoming comprehensible specifically to us. They were to her and others long before a century or more than a century ago. A septenate, I see sep and I sing septenate. A separate continent is described as being connected with the long career of each of the great Rus races. First continent was called the imperishable sacred land. This is geographically at the North Pole. It is destined to last to the end of the planetary manvantara of this mysterious cradle of the first humanity. Very little is said. The name chosen for the second continent was the Hyperborean. It was the land which stretched out its promontories southward and westward from the North Pole to receive the second race, and comprised the whole of what is now known as Northern Asia. The oldest Greeks spoke of the Hyperboreans dwelling somewhere far north and visited yearly by Apollo, which astronomically was the sun, the god of light. Lemuria was the immense third continent which once reigned supreme over the Indian, Atlantic, and the Pacific Oceans, and was the home of the third root race. The Lemurians were the successors or progeny of the second root race. They were the same embodying egos who had begun to cycle down into earth matter together. They had spent vast periods of time in arriving at the stage where their gigantic astral bodies were becoming physicalized in forms which were progressively to consolidate and diminish in the evolutionary course which led to the present conditions of mankind. The continents were destroyed alternately by fire and water. Lemuria's fate came through volcanic fires from a series of subterranean convulsions and the breaking asunder of the ocean floors. For the surviving remnants of Lemuria, we are referred to part of California, Australia, with its aborigines and primitive fauna and flora, and to some of the islands sown hither and thither on the face of the Pacific. Atlantis is the fourth continent historically recorded in the ancient traditions of all peoples. Its fate is to be told in the Bible story of Noah and the flood. Plato's famous island of Atlantis was but the last fragment of it to be submerged. The fifth continent was America, but as it is situated at the antipodes, I don't know how to say that either. There could be a couple ways, I suppose. It is Europe and Asia Minor, almost coeval with it. Let's see what coeval means. I don't know that I've seen that word before. Let's see. Having the same age or date of origin, contemporary. Contemporary, okay. So we got that. Asia Minor, having the same age, right, which are generally referred to by the Indo-Aryan occultists as the fifth, if their teaching followed the appearance of the continents in their geological and geographical order, then this classification would have to be altered. But as the sequence of the continents is made to follow the order of evolution of the races from the first to the fifth, our Aryan root race, Europe, must be called the fifth great continent. And that's from the Secret Doctrine. The great racial cycles overlap so that the history of the first two really human races, that is, the last of the Lemurians and the first of the future Atlanteans, is more or less blended. The early third root race was androgynous and mindless in the sense that its consciousness was more intuitional than mental and physical, but as the ages of development passed by, the fires of mind were lighted by Saputras, lofty beings from higher spheres. The sexes were separated and the bodies acquired a bony framework, the astral body becoming the inner model body, the seat of the five senses today. These evolutionary changes explain the allegory of the mental sleep of Adam preceding the separation of the rib bone, which became Eve. This is some stuff. This is something I would definitely sit and meditate on as well. It's talking about essentially we're talking about the nervous system here, I think. Okay, continuing on. The later Lemurians were ruled over by divine dynasties, and these lofty rulers taught them the arts and sciences, so that they knew astronomy, architecture, and mathematics to perfection. This primeval civilization did not, as one may think, immediately follow their psychological transformation, their physiological transformation. Between the final evolution and the first city built, many hundred thousands of years had passed, yet we find the Lemurians in their sixth subrace building their first rock cities out of stone and lava. One of such great cities of primitive structure was built entirely of lava, some 30 miles west from where Easter Island now stretches, its narrow piece of sterile ground, and was entirely destroyed by a series of volcanic eruptions. As evidence of the knowledge and skill of these gigantic builders, the Secret Doctrine points to the Cyclopean ruins and monuments scattered around the world. These archaeological exhibits not only testify to extraordinary strength and engineering skills in their builders, but hint at more knowledge of potent invisible forces than modern man controls as yet. The further researches of archaeology, geology, ethnology, and of nature's finer forces will unite in confirming the ancient history of the human races, which is handed down in universal traditions. It was the golden age in those days of old, the age when the gods walked the earth and mixed freely with the mortals. Since then, the gods departed and became invisible, and later generations ended by worshiping their kingdoms, the elements. Thus the first Atlantean races, born on the Lemurian continent, separated from their earliest tribes into the righteous and the unrighteous, and to those who worship the one unseen spirit of nature, the ray of which man feels within himself, or the pantheists, and those who offered fanatical worship to the spirits of the earth, the dark cosmic anthropomorphic powers with whom they made alliance. These were the earliest Gibborim, the mighty men of renown in those days. And from Genesis 6, who become with the fifth race of Kabirim, Kabiri with the Egyptians and the Phoenicians, Titans with the Greek, and Rakshasas and Daityas with the Indian races. Such was the secret and mysterious origin of all the subsequent and modern religions. Here in a word is the explanation of how men brought evil into the world. When their eyes were opened by spiritual guides, they were gifted with the light of mind, which gave them a knowledge of good and evil. Even in the third root race, a number used their free will in choosing to follow the right-hand path of light. Some of their brothers turned and followed the left-hand path of shadows. These latter consistently misused their powers and knowledge life after life, they were the Lemuro Atlanteans who became tall with pride. They used their control over nature forces for selfish ambition and evil ends. They became a mighty race of sorcerers, ever at war with their righteous brothers. The conflict continued age after age as humanity descended into denser levels of matter up to the middle of the Atlantean cycle. By that time, the root race had developed a brilliant civilization very largely of black magicians. In the end, after minor submersions extending for several million years, the evildoers went down with the last watery cataclysm. Meantime, their wiser brothers had separated from them and, under spiritual guides, had migrated to distant lands that escaped the deluge. From these migrants came the beginnings of the present fifth or so-called Aryan root race, which includes virtually all human beings living on Earth today. The germ of our present root race dates back to the middle of the Atlantean cycle. Likewise, the germ of the subrace of the sixth root race is even now stirring among us. The unfortunate evil Atlantean egos were self-doomed to pass ages of repeated incarnations, suffering the effects of their past evil doings. Bereft by karma of the mental and spiritual gifts they had betrayed, many of them were reduced to abject ignorance and degradation. On every hand, the united working of karma, reincarnation, and cycles points to the original purpose of bringing everything up to a balanced state of perfection. In the lower kingdoms, under nature's direction, things run more true to type than do men as the ideal of human possibilities. As a rule, our best traits and our worst ones are inconsistent with a balanced character. However, a day of reckoning is inevitable, the sooner the better for our own progress. How often men and women of ability and worth seem held to limited and distasteful conditions of life. Presumably they are reviewing some unbalanced account from previous lives. W.Q. Judge explains that in one life, one may be in an advanced subrace in accordance with predominating qualities, but in that incarnation may bring up certain defects or generate certain causes requiring him to pass over next life to some other less progressed subrace for the purpose of extirpating the defects or working off of causes. In this way, accurate adjustment, perfect development, regularity, and roundness are all amply provided for. Will not the issues of such an experience be more easily, contentedly, and rapidly worked out if one knew the meaning of the laws of his own being? Suppose we were aware that something within us, which does know, will rest at nothing less than perfect work. And I think we get that. And I think we're picking up on that now for sure. Let's see how long this fourth chapter is here. Now let's do it. Let's do the fourth chapter, and that will finish this first section of the book. And then there's really just this is a 4-day study, which is really perfect. Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, from Corinthians. Every human organ in each cell in the latter has a keyboard of its own, like that of a piano, only that it registers and emits sensations instead of sounds. Every key contains a potentiality of good or bad, of producing harmony or disharmony. This depends on the impulse given and the combinations produced, on the force of the touch of the artist at work. A double-faced unity indeed. This depth on the impulse given and the combinations produced. Double-faced unity indeed, and that's from HPB. Verily, that body, so desecrated by materialism and man himself, is the temple of the Holy Grail, the adytum of the grandest, nay, I don't know what that adytum, I'll have to look this up too, but that's good, building our vocabulary. Adytum. The innermost sanctuary of an ancient Greek temple. Okay. The innermost sanctuary of an ancient Greek temple, of the grandest, nay, of all the mysteries of nature in our solar system. Yeah. So we're talking about materialism here. Really, that body and man himself is the temple of the Holy Grail. All right, that body is an Aeolian harp corded with two sets of strings, one made of pure silver, the other of catgut. I gotta look this up too, but this is super interesting right here. A material used for the strings of some musical instrument, made of dry twisted intestines of sheep or horses, but not cats. But it sounds like it works out to be similar to what it sounds, put it that way. And you know, HPB's the Lucifer magazine was one of their earlier works, right? And we know, if you're listening to this and you see that and you thought that I skipped over it, Lucifer means light bearer. This is not referencing the biblical usage of it. It's just not that. So we're not even going to go there. H.P. Blavatsky further explains how the body responds to the vital touch of its indwelling creator, the dual man. His quality of thought and feeling sets the harp's pure silver or its animal strings vibrating with the operations of his better or lower self. The embodied artist is playing continually on one or other set of strings, thereby arousing in them a habit of responsive vibrations. The influence of his habitual trend of playing, being registered upon the instrument, naturally reverberates back on his mind and heart. Too often our body habits get the upper hand and our will to change them for our own good. There is practical wisdom in keeping the heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life, as Solomon advised, in keeping the heart with all diligence. Fortunately, nature, who supplies the material of our earth body, has more to do with operating it than we understand or control. Our silent partner, nature, manages our wonderful body so well that we rather take it for granted that it runs itself. It is equipped with two nervous systems, and this is what we were kind of talking about earlier in relation to the astral body up above in the 3rd chapter. But first, there is the cerebrospinal nervous system, which functions with the brain, the senses, and the voluntary activities. Its vibrations being associated with our human nature, They are not usually as orderly as the rhythmic operations of the second or sympathetic nervous system, which nature controls. However, both systems being intimately connected, they constantly react upon each other and reflecting the conscious, the sub, and the superconscious life forces. I suppose the astral being back behind this. It is nature which keeps us going before birth and afterwards when we are asleep or awake, conscious or unconscious, sane or insane, sick or well, vigorous or paralyzed. Nature works through the automatic nervous system to bring us back to smooth running order when we are either mentally or physically disordered. All the physiological functions are rhythmic. Their activities are timed in accord with the natural pulsation of the cosmic heartbeat. Medical researches show that in the functions of respiration, circulation, digestion, secretion, excretion, gestation, etc., each organ has its own rate of vibratory motion, its recurring ebb and flow of vital purpose. Tiny ciliated cells, as in the bronchial lining, move the moisture in an outgoing current by their own rate of waving their delicate hairlets back and forth. The heart repeats its cycle of systole and distole and rest about 4 times as fast as the tide of air rises and falls in the lungs. Yet both are timed together so that the blood is received, purified, and passed on its rounds. There is a wonderful balanced relation of all organs' pulsations to each other and to the whole body. The coordinate system of continuous cycles within us and its orderly precision is regulated like a solar system. To say the least, the body is a marvelous living mechanism of interacting wheels. Mathematics, so exact in astronomical calculations, show that ratios of periodicity in the solar system are repeated in our body. Our organs pulsate in multiples of the solar heartbeat. For example, the sun is the heart of the solar system. At the beginning of the 11-year sunspot period, there is something akin to contraction and an outpouring of the sun's life force, similar to our circulation of life blood. The solar vital currents reach the outermost limits of its system to return progressively for another 11-year round. The sun has been vitalizing our humanity during the coming and going of its past 4 root races. Each root race, in its turn, evolved through a regular series of 4 periods of differing character and duration. Our present 5th root race repeats this typical cyclic series. Its first period lasts 1,728,000 years, its second 1,296,000 years, and its third 864,000 years, while the 4th period, our present age, will take 432,000 years, a total of 4,320,000 years. And this is from a glossary regarding yugas. This sequence of digits 432 turns out to be a key number in certain recurring rounds above and below. In popular language, the progression of the equinoxes is a gain, so to say, of approximately 50 seconds on the arc of 360 degrees, which the sun completes in its yearly circuit in moving around among the constellations. We've heard this mentioned in science, right? But we're getting a much better feel for it now. It'll assimilate, as far as I'm concerned. This year's fraction of 1/72nd of a degree accumulates until it totals the complete arc of 360 degrees. The sun then has arrived at the same place among the constellations in a cycle of 25,920 years, or a Platonic year. This cycle among the celestial bodies has its miniature copy in our own bodies. That is, we breathe in and out, completing one respiration about 18 times a minute. In 24 hours, we breathe 25,920 times. And our little day has a respiratory round on a similar scale of the sun's precessional movement. Meantime, our heartbeat averages 72 times a minute, and the sun takes 72 years to pass 1 degree along its zodiacal round. Our heartbeat in an hour totals 4,320 times, repeating the digits of the ancient key number. The mathematical analogy can be carried further in showing the universality of periodicity. The significant point is the intermingling of active physical and superphysical forces through our sympathetic nervous system, the intelligent laws of nature, time, our organic rhythms with the superconscious heart of the universe. As above, so below. In this microcosm of ours, which is so awesome, the body cells not only have their functional rhythm, but they are timed to come and go by dividing into new cells. This simple division into new entities is now seen in lowest forms of animal and vegetable life. It repeats the way in which the ethereal spherical first root race reproduced itself. Our body cells are reborn, so to say, like miniature copies of the primeval method of the race. Some of our cells divide rapidly, as in young creatures. Others change slowly, as in old age and in bone. But the ebb and flow is continuous. The whole body is changed in 7-year cycles, so that the man of 70 years has re-embodied, relatively speaking, 10 times in one lifetime. He passes away, but to return for another circuit on earth. Life and death, then, are only the systole and distole of the cosmic heartbeat, which, for us, keeps the spiritual self coming and going here and elsewhere. Occult physiology explains that there is in nature a law that operates in every department, whether moral or physical, and which may now be called that of undulation and then that of inhibition, while at other times it reappears as vibration and still again as attraction and repulsion. But all these changes are only apparent because at bottom it is the same. In our own blood circulation, we find the blood propelled from the heart, and that nature has provided little valves which will not permit it to return to the heart by the way it can. The occultist declares that the impulses from the heart, and that organ receives its impulse from the great astral heart of the Akasa, which has been said by all mystics to have a double motion or alternate vibration, the systole and distole or diastole of nature. So in this sense, the valve in the circulation represents the abyss behind us that we cannot repass. We are in the great general circulation and compelled, whether we like it or not, to obey its forward impulses. That's a pretty awesome statement there. We are related consciously as well as mathematically to the sun and moon and the planets. Their orbital and interrelated positions at the time of our birth affect the trend of that incarnation. From this family of celestial bodies ebb and flow currents of the several spiritual, mental, psychic, astral, and physical life forces which circulate through us and everything else. The periodicity of the disintegrating moon has a marked dual influence which is both constructive and disorganizing. Its recurring phases are related to the periodicity of all reproductive physiology, to changes in diseases, and to growth of vegetation, etc. Its psychic and astral emanations are reflected in mental and emotional disorders. All these forces were so well understood by the ancients that they could benefit by the good and could minimize the ill effects of their influence. We human units contribute our share of the disorderly elements in the solar family, but we gain in power for good and square our account in proportion to our individual balance of right or wrong. The vibrating quality of our conscious life is imprinted on the texture of our bodies, like mental and emotional fossils indicating their place in finer or coarser grades of earth stuff. Even the physical contrast between a noble, clean-minded person and a selfish, bestial type is evident. The bodies of the evil Atlanteans were coarse and sensual. The earth, too, then had reached its lowest level of materiality. From their mid-fourth round, the planetary wheel began to revolve on the upward arc, and matter began to refine. In line with this is the process of radioactivity, which science is studying in rocks and minerals. Some interesting examples are reported showing a cyclic course of events running through matter as well as in mind. Moreover, in both, the cycles run concurrently because moving with a common purpose. We read that. Thus it comes about that in the etherealizing process, which our Earth globe is now undergoing, the heaviest of the chemical elements and compounds will first become radioactive, radiating their substance away with increasing speed, and will be followed by the next or less heavy and gross, the process continuing until the end of the present fourth round in particular, and with intervals of the reverse process during the downward arc of the succeeding rounds, proceeding until the seventh round will have reached its climax or end. By that time, the globe and all on it will have returned to the highly ethereal state or condition of matter that prevailed through the first round. And you can see on this picture, we come back up to the top. If we look at this over here as the first round, and this being the seventh, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, I suppose, right? That's kind of how it's in one of the books. We would have to find that. I could not find it. I might have been looking in the wrong place. It might be in Annie Besant's book. The picture of human beings evolving step by step with the matter of their bodies and in the body of the earth shows a scientific phase of universal brotherhood as a fact in nature. This is no mere metaphysical concept or human platitude. It is a natural fact, consistent with the essentials of science, philosophy, and ethics, the three phases of the one truth. The material of the Earth's body was with us when we were cycling round the moon chain. The lunar life atoms re-embodied again with our humanity here, bearing the quality of our former impress, both helpful and harmful influences. Likewise, our individual life atoms from former incarnations come back each time, drawn to us by psychomagnetic attraction. This is nature's provision of the harvest field in which the unexpended causes of our past sowing may work out their effects. For example, the seeds of a karmic disease find a ready culture medium in one person's body conditions, while they will not grow in his neighbor's tissue because he is karmically exempt. Again, we see the musical, inventive, or other genius, or the infant prodigies, with the physical organisms with which each can express the mental ability they have severally attained in previous life cycles. There is the same repetitive coming home of our astral model body atoms. That's our astral model body atoms, and of the ethereal, mental, and emotional substances which belong to us. The same rigid justice that rules in the universe operates upon all planes of our being. There's no cheating. It's been said many times. There's no cheating. And that is indicative of this statement I'd like to say. The chemical elements that are combined in our body organs, the musical notes that satisfy our sense of harmony, and the colors that appeal to our eyes, each have their mathematical rates of vibration of their progressive octaves, it is said. To demonstrate more clearly the seven in nature, it may be added that not only does the number 7 govern the periodicity of the phenomena of life, but that it is also found dominating the series of chemical elements and equally paramount in the world of sound and in that of color as revealed to us by the spectroscope. This number is the factor sine qua non, I've looked that up before, in the production of occult astral phenomena. Let's look it up again. An essential condition, a thing that is absolutely necessary.
Sine qua non.
Sine qua non. Okay, so there we go. Funny stuff. It's essential in the production of occult astral phenomenon. Since the above was published in 1888, marked scientific advances and have shown how the different rates of vibratory forces appear as different phenomena. The popularity of the radio has made everyone wavelength conscious. The Secret Doctrine anticipated outstanding scientific advances of all kinds which show the intimate relation, if not the evident unity, of matter and force. This gives a scientific basis for a unity between conscious human forces and matter, which later now is recognized as electronic in nature. For instance, our present 5 senses are responsive to vibratory rates, which also manifest in tangible forms of sound, color, etc. So this is how we interact with the system, right? And think of all of the amazing ways that technology has evolved since then, since this, oh my gosh. So the five senses and their several sense organs were not evolved simultaneously in humanity, but came in serial order as regards time and sequence. Briefly, then, each root race toward the close of its great cycle had developed one of the seven senses in full functional activity. The first root race evolved hearing, the second root race added to this the sense of touch, the third added sight, the fourth taste. Our present fifth root race has smell with the other senses, and also the potentiality of two more that will evolve during the future sixth and seventh root races. And I don't remember right now off the top of my head what these are, or I don't know what they are right now, but I would say that these senses are all related to the subplanes of the physical plane and planes, and they're related to the advancing of the planes, so it all folds back on each other again, if that makes any sense. I'm visualizing this for myself here. That hearing was the first sense acquired as the oldest in point of time and of experience agrees with our ability to hear 11 octaves of sound, while our eyes see but one octave of light. It is pointed out in the esoteric tradition that the wireless wavelengths thus far known, covering some 11 or 12 octaves, manifest as sound and correspond to our sense of hearing. Passing along the scale through octaves of shorter wavelengths, we pass through waves producing a sense of heat, i.e. touch. Continuing through octaves of still shorter waves, we reach the range of visible radiation. Here the sevenfold colors of light correspond to sight. Passing through still more rapid wavelengths, we enter the ultraviolet range of the scale, which is related to our sense of taste. Next come the extremely short wavelengths of X-rays, which correspond to the sense of smell. And I hope you can see as we're reading this that things are becoming more subtle. That's probably the easiest way to explain that. Our latent sixth and seventh senses will evolve progressively, are called forth by the unfolding of our higher mental and spiritual nature, right? And I want to say it's probably the mental nature and intuition, and aspects and implications of that. Then we shall radiate the constructive, inspiring forces of mind and heart as spontaneously as we now use our other senses. At that far distant period, the body will have become formed of more refined, flexible, and enduring substance. The human being will have acquired the balance of positive and negative creative forces, as sex is but a passing phase of procreation. Sickness, and it's just a duality, right? A polarity, and then sickness will be unknown, as the then enlightened humanity will have learned to work in unison with the finer forces of nature. In such future ideal conditions on the upward arc, man will be self-consciously evolving through realms of being, through which, as an unself-conscious God spark, he had slowly descended into matter in the downward arc, the Kabbalistic saying that man becomes a stone, a plant, an animal, a man, a spirit, and finally God, is true as to his forms of embodiment. In the ethereal first three rounds, he passed through the filmy presentments of what became the stones, plants, animals, and animals of the physical fourth round. He still uses the mineral and plant elements in his body. The human embryo now develops through a repetition of forms which hint at experience in the earlier root races. I don't know this word. The diapason. Let's look it up. HPB really had the most amazing vocabulary, and used the words as a master would in terms of their best use at the best time to incorporate the most meaning or significance and reason, logic behind what the thought was that was trying to be passed along. So yeah, of course she would have had a fantastic vocabulary. So it's an organ stop sounding a main register of flue pipes, typically of 8-foot pitch, a grand swelling burst of harmony. Diapason. The diapason of type is run through, in brief, the potentiality of every organ useful to animal life is locked up in man, the microcosm of the macrocosm, and that of the lower three worlds, right? The mineral, vegetable, and animal. So because of vast ages of experience in all kinds and forms of matter, the embryonic body is evolved now in 9 months. In its earlier months, its indistinct sex hints first at the asexual, and then at the androgynous early root races. Another hint of the early rounds is the early development and prominent position of the pineal gland, which later is covered over by the embryonic brain. This small gland, to which physiology assigns no function, represents the once active third eye. At present, it is deeply concealed within the hollow of the brain, where it is intimately related to all the intellectual, sensory, and psychic centers. It is pointed out that it has once been active, for nature never creates the smallest, the most insignificant forms without some definite purpose and use. It was an active organ, we say, at the stage of evolution when the spiritual element in man reigned supreme over the hardly nascent intellectual and psychic elements. And as the cycle ran down toward that point, when the physiological senses were developed by and when hold on, let's do this again. Paris. They went to equal footing. Pari passu. And the cycle ran down to the point of physiology where senses went on equal footing with pari passu, the growth and consolidation of the physical man, the interminable and complex vicissitudes and tribulations of zoological development. That median eye ended by atrophying along with the earlier and purely psychic characteristics in man. In the beginning, every class and family of living species was hermaphrodite and objectively one-eyed. It is further stated that in the winding cyclic course of the great law, this eye will again function when we shall have reached the spiritual levels on the upward arc. Then, As perfected human beings, we leave earth life to rest before beginning the next higher rounds of existence as young gods. There is an analogy between the human ego's whole course of planetary unfoldment and the evolutionary circuit which it travels in one incarnation. The ego begins each life as a little child, gains an experience, and in old age its outgoing pathway recrosses some of the incoming levels. The newborn brings with it a refreshing sense of otherworldliness and is little awake here at first. Gradually the child walks along into an untried world, happy, irresponsible, and trusting. In the so-called second childhood, the ego's tide of vital forces turn. With the ebbing of conscious and vital currents, the aging body and brain are less awake here, are more detached, the person is forgetful, but living in childlike memories is careless and dependent. The life force ebbing here is beginning a cycle otherwhere. And the ego, now going home, recrosses the inner levels by which it came. Senility often means an overlapping cycle of rebirth beyond the veil. Space forbids discussion on the tuatara, an ancient type of lizard with a third eye found in New Zealand. Also, the marsupials, which dominate the fauna in Australia, represent a transition stage between the monotremes, or egg layers, and the placental mammals. What but the overlapping of ancient cycles accounts for these peculiar types? Evidently, they are subject to the same law of retardation, which has held back the Australian Aborigines living on this relic of old Lemuria. Modern biological researches are following the physiological changes of the cell inwardly, so to say, to the borderland of immaterial forces. Occult physiology points to the cosmic intelligence of nature as the causative agent directing the cell in bringing forth only its own kind of form and function. The invisible, re-embodying life germ of plant and animal even, ages old in its own kind of experience, is beyond the range of the microscope. Experimenters in changing the natural order of the chromosomes or other elements of the fertilized cell are only dealing with the natural vehicle or body through which intelligence is manifesting. The results, however interesting, will be disorder because artificial and therefore will confuse rather than reveal the question of the issues of life which are sought. And that was the first section and the first half of this, and I think so interesting. Lots of key points there that can probably, that can be pulled out and probably made into a second video to really, just lay out the analogies and that, lay out the connections, the correspondences directly, which would be probably helpful. But we'll look to do that another time in the future or in other videos. But okay, I'm going to stop it there, and we're going to see how this new recording came out. All right, thank you. Have a good one.